Barton, Opie, and Marge Hill, thank you so much for doing our prelude. Somehow I was under the impression that we were going to be having a recording for that, and you're so much better than it's Giraldi. We appreciate it. The Victorian novelist, Mary Ann Evans, better known by her pen name, George Eliot, once said that the dead are never really dead to us until we have forgotten them. And so we gather here on this day that started off so cold and snowy, it has really appropriately turned into a beautiful sunny day to remember the life of Georgiana Jensen Adamson, known by everyone simply as Georgie. She was a daughter, sister, wife, mother, and grandmother. She was a teacher, a colleague, a social justice warrior. She was a friend to many, known for her impeccable comedic timing and her commitment to trying to reverse every single wrong that's ever existed in the world. And so I invite you now to silence your cell phone as we enter into this time of attention and hope. My name is Reverend Denis Letourneau Hall, and I have the incredible honor of serving this congregation as its developmental minister. Welcome to our home. Georgie's Unitarian Universalist faith was a big part of her identity, and it was marked by her commitment to two congregations in particular: the Unitarian Universalist Society of Cleveland and this congregation. In houses of worship like these, whenever we gather, it's our custom to mark our time together by lighting a chalice, the symbol of our commitment for making the world more just and more compassionate, contained within a symbol of our covenant, the covenant we make with the world, with each other, and with the God of our diverse understandings. So I've asked Reverend Joe Cherry, the minister from the society, to light our chalice this morning as I share the words of glory with you. Birth is a miracle of love and courage, bringing light to the world. Death is a loss of light, but no less an act of courage, for we are born from and return to mystery. All deaths are hard. They remind us of our own mortality, and they bring up the deaths of everyone that we still grieve. And the deaths will never get over. Just when we think we're at the place where sadness has subsided or maybe even started to go away, a new death reminds us that past grief hasn't gone away. We've just learned how to live with it. Georgie's death is no exception. So we have reason today to pause and think not just of her, but all those we've known and loved who lived their lives with the kind of loyalty and fierce sense of right and wrong that made them so capable of giving and receiving love and respect. For most of us, we have an enormous number of people that we carry with us in our thoughts, our imaginations, our understandings of who we are. We carry our ancestors with us quite literally in our bones, our cells, our DNA that these days can be measured and tracked and mapped across the globe in centuries. We carry with us our closest friends, neighbors, coworkers, even the people that we've affected without ever even realizing it. All these people who've passed this life form a great cloud of witnesses that follows us wherever we go. If we're careful, if we're really attentive, we can notice all those times when they are with us, encouraging us, strengthening us, making us greater versions of ourselves than we ever thought we could be. With her death, Georgie has joined our great cloud of witnesses. She's here now. If we listen closely, we can hear her laughter. We can feel the warmth of her love of life, her love of each of us, even as she suffered with so much pain in her last years. And with her comes her great cloud of witnesses, an enormous gathering of her ancestors that include her parents, Mary Jensen and Elmer Jensen, her sister, Marion Jensen, who came to be known as Tarpa, her brother Eugene, who died in infancy, her best friends, Peg Skelly and Joanna Buck. When you came in this morning, you had a chance to pick up a stone from the bowl next to the guest book before you came into the sanctuary. A stone like this. If you didn't get a chance to pick one up, there's a bowl right at the back of the aisle. I'd like to invite you now to go and get one if you will. I'd also like to ask you to hold on to your stone now, intentionally. Begin by looking at it and noticing its color and its shape, the way it catches the light with these wonderful little sparkles in them. Hold it in your hand. Feel its shape. Feel its texture, its temperature, which is changing with the warmth from your body. If you're comfortable doing so, go ahead and close your eyes. As you think about your own great cloud of witnesses, who is with you now? Who follows you, strengthening you, whispering inspiration into your soul even when you think you can't hear it? Who are your ancestors? Your loved ones who have gone before you? The people who can't be with you every day, the people who would love to be here now but can't be. Let's take a moment now to name them aloud into this space. So now I'd like to invite you to come to the center of the space and place your stone into the bowl on the altar. through the east entrance on the side where the smaller parking lot is, you may have noticed that in the center of the walkway, there's a circular cutout. And in the center of it is an image of the flaming chalice, and it's surrounded by white stones. So these stones will go into that space so that a part of each of our individual great cloud witnesses and Georgie's become a part of this place and part of this landscape that will pass as we come and go.
Okay, before I begin, I'd like to just take a moment to thank everybody that came, everyone who has support for Georgie, for her family, and it means an awful lot to us. On behalf of my father, Don, my brother, Jack, his wife, Nancy, my wife, Lisa, and all 6 of Georgie's grandkids, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you to the minister, thank you to the Unitarian Society, always a wonderful, warm place, and all of the people that have helped us here today. We truly appreciate it. So, 3 of the many things I inherited from my mother. First one, sensitivity and emotions. I hope to get through this today, but if I don't, the minister has kindly said he would help me out. My mother decided to give me that sensitivity, and I wear it proudly. Second, a gift of gab. If my father or brother had been doing this, we probably would have been out of here about 5 minutes ago. Could have gotten to the blue-haired specials and had some fun. But you guys drew the short straw, you got me. So my apologies that this might go a little bit longer than the typical eulogy, but please appreciate this is a special, special person. And finally, before I begin, I was thinking about how to do this, what form, what I wanted to say, how to celebrate this woman. Mom did not want a funeral, she wanted a celebration. We're here for a celebration, but I had to do a tribute, a memorial, because I find her life amazing, I find her spirit and soul amazing. So as I thought about it, I realized one more thing my mother and I both shared, a love of reading. This woman's nose was always in a book when she was sitting down. She read everything for pleasure, for knowledge. She just never stopped reading. I picked up that same love. And then we shared a secret. My mother's wish might have been to write a novel. I kind of share that secret. So as I thought about how to do this and how to give her a tribute, I realized my mother wrote a book. She did write one. She lived this amazing story, this amazing life. So I'd like to share Georgie Adamson's book. Georgie Adamson, A Life of Dedication and Service. Forward. I've been extremely fortunate in life to have 2 heroes. I'm fortunate to still have one, and I will cherish the time with my father. Now we celebrate Georgie, my fallen hero. My mom was a wonderful human being who was always quick to smile and laugh. She made fast friends and treated friends like family. She had curiosity sourcing through her soul and constantly sought to learn more about everything. Her true gift was not just her love of what she learned, but in her desire to bring everyone along on the journey. What she found fascinating, she assumed you would too. And she was almost always right, even when you didn't think so at the time. When I was in my early teen years or preteen years on one of our amazing trips, Mom pronounced, "Hey, I see the clog dancing championships are being held in town tonight. We should get tickets and go." How often can you say, "I saw the clog dancing championships"? My immediate thought was, never, Mom, and I'd be fine spending my life seeing that. Well, I have seen a clog dancing championship live. It was one of 1,000 cuts of diversity, understanding, and acceptance Mom exposed me to, so I could see the beauty in all people, in all art forms. Chapter 1, Beginnings. Georgie was born in Footville, Wisconsin on February 26, 1936. Her father worked his way up to manager of a pet milk company plant. Elmer Jensen was good, and the company moved him a few times to advance his career or even to help struggling plants. While Georgie was growing up, she had the added childhood burden of moving to new small towns every few years and trying to fit in. Her mother, Mary, my grandma, was a wonderful woman in so many ways, but she was not emotionally adept in dealing with feelings, so not the best help when trying to navigate the awkward combination of adolescence and a new school. Georgie did find an area in her childhood that would end up being part of her most magical times of her youth and adulthood later. She spent grades 3 through 10 on her family farm in Angola, Indiana, and this time reinforced her love of animals and nature. It was a gentleman's farm, so it was her playland. She had her dog Skippy, she had a pet goat named Sweet Pea, and she enjoyed all farm animals like sheep and cows. She loved riding her horse. She enjoyed helping her mother tend to the flowers, fruits, and vegetables they grow on their 100+ acres of property. Chapter 2, Great Changes Within. Georgie graduated Coldwater High School in 1954. Her yearbook entries were the following: music club, band, senior scholarship test, yearbook staff, speech department, homecoming attendant, Valentine's sweetheart, and DAR test. For those that don't know, Daughters of the American Revolution. All of these high school activities show how bright and diverse she was, but the true essence of Georgie was captured in her favorite quote. All the seniors had one. Her quote for life: laugh and the world laughs with you. In 1954, Georgie enrolled in Bowling Green State University. She joined a sorority and became friends with someone who would change her life in future years, her friend Annie. Georgie graduated in 1958 with her teaching degree and found work in a big city of sorts, Cleveland. She moved to a new job in the Garfield High School system. Being a young single woman in a new setting, my mom grew even closer to her college friend Ann. My Aunt Annie had married her college sweetheart Larry Dilly, and they were starting their careers in Cleveland. The laugh until tears run down her face stories became legendary with this couple. Ann and Larry introduced my parents, as Larry knew my dad from college. After getting married about 6 months after meeting and 59+ years of marriage, I would say that Billy Hunch was spot on. Jack was born in 1961, and I came along 3 years later. This 10-year period from high school graduation in 1954 to being married with 2 kids in 64 represented a huge change for my mom. However, the biggest change may not have been within Georgie, but the world. Chapter 3, Great Change Without. It was the 1960s and the world was getting interesting. Georgie did what she would always do. She educated herself and got involved. In the summer of 1963, she and my dad went down to be in attendance for a speech by Dr. Martin Luther King, a man she listed as her hero in her 2008 50th BGSU homecoming celebration bio. 2 years later, in 1965, the beginnings of the always present guest in our house began. I'm not exactly sure how my mom turned out the way she did. My hunch is her childhood forged who she would become. Her constant feelings of being a stranger struck her, I believe. I don't think my mom ever wanted anyone to feel like they didn't fit in. That was her entire life's mission, after her dear family, of course. The analogy that comes to my mind over the last week or so as I've reflected on her is the oxygen masks on the airplane and the instructions we always get when we're about to fly. Georgie had her partner in Don, and then added her boys, and she made absolute sure we had the masks of love covering us. Then, she started to supply the love masks to those she felt needed them. As a child, I always had a feeling of total love from her, but I also had the esoteric feeling like she was reaching across me constantly, as she was helping someone else too with their mask of love. In 1965, with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and all the attention and energy that takes, the first of the invited guests arrived. She and my dad offered for a gentleman to stay at our house who was in town for a first ever revolutionary transplant surgery at the Cleveland Clinic. Life magazine did a big spread on this, and there was a picture of the patient recovering on our couch in the Cleveland Heights home. The second time invited guests stayed at our house, it did not make the national news. It made the local news. It was 1968 when my parents signed up to house some young African-American men who were coming to Cleveland for a freedom march. A reporter recognized my father picking up the men. The paper did a story and put a photo on the front page. It was my dad, my brother, and I at our breakfast table with 3 young marchers and my mother serving. I won't repeat the words For most of the letters my parents received over the next several weeks and months reacting to this photo, the nastiest words applied to my mom. Needless to say, they were filled with bile, filled with threats, filled with evil wishes, and filled with hate. One had a KKK business card inside. On the beautiful side, one letter was from a mother in Chicago, Illinois. Ironically, one of the few with a return address on it. She wrote to thank my mom as she worried dearly about her son going off on such a dangerous movement and was so thrilled that my mom treated her son with love. The letter said that her son loved my mom, and therefore Mrs. Moore did too. He stayed there 1 or 2 nights, folks. She also thanked her for the picture of her son that my mom had mailed off to her. This was the essence of Georgie. Spend a night or two in her home, and you were family. This time in life coincided with her activism for causes. Joining the Unitarian Church at East 82nd and Euclid brought my parents in contact with many fellow concerned citizens and opportunities. Georgie and Don helped start Heights Citizens for Human Rights, which eventually became Heights Congress. Their mission is equal opportunities and housing for all people. She also marched in the Vietnam War protests. Mom was not a fan of our government sending young men to die in a war that more and more seemed unwinnable and had questionable reasons for involvement. Other causes as well would draw her attention, and she would help with what she could. She educated herself, as always, and let her voice be heard. The invited guests kept on coming too. No more media attention. In the early 1970s, my parents signed up to be a host family for visiting social work graduate students. We had 2 years in a row that we had a foreign social worker staying with us for most of a school year. The first guest was a gem of a human being, Tijani from Nigeria. He was a very large man, warm and friendly with a laugh that rumbled throughout our house. He loved being our guest and we loved him back. He would scoop up my brother and I and plop us on his massive lap and regale us with African folk tales. The following year we had a turd, Mom's words, that stayed with us from Italy. More lessons from Mom that I got to learn firsthand how the color of one's skin has zero to do with the person inside. Chapter 4, Magical Times. As the mid-1970s approached, the civil unrest in America was winding down. My brother and I were growing up. Georgie losing her father and my dad switching to a job in the education field led to an approximate 10-year period of life that us 4 Adamsons all described as one word, magic. Over a 10-year run, we spent our entire summers in one of 2 fashions, either living on my grandma's farm or taking camping trips that lasted 6 to 8 weeks. Most summers we did both. The farm was the same one Georgie spent some years growing up on. We started to spend time there to help my widowed grandmother keep up so much property and buildings. Our days took on a wonderful rhythm. Chores all morning, a large country dinner around noon, and then bathing suits, skis, and inner tubes as we would go down to our boat on Lake James and spend the afternoons getting waterlogged and sun-poached. We would head home for supper and then usually cards or games at night, or reading, of course. Georgie exposed Jack and me to some of the joy of country living on these magical summers. So we had a cat briefly, a dog, and many other animals as pets, including a goat, rabbits, and tame local raccoons. Our dog was named Mike Fink. We called him Mike. Mom named him this because Mike Fink was a character in a Mark Twain novel. Of course, Georgie would name a pet after a literary figure. We also had a large garden we tended and grew our own vegetables and fruits. Probably half of these days had more than our family of 4 and Grandma Jensen. The invited guests continued all summer, every summer. If you knew my parents or if you knew my brother or me, you would get an invite to come and spend time with us. Our camping trip summers would be bookended by stays on the farm to tend to chores. The amazing trips began. 3 major ones and a few smaller ones. The major ones would be 6 to 8 weeks. We would do them every other summer due to the cost and the time, mini trips in the off years. First, the planning. Georgie would spend some of the previous winter and spring weekends with maps and atlases spread out. As a family, we would decide general route, what points of interest in national and state parks that we would like to see that year. Us kids she always asked us kids what we would like to see them do. Here she was letting her kids help pick family vacation destinations. Another life lesson my mom taught me early on, employee buy-in. I mean, would you want to drive for thousands of miles with 2 kids in the back seat complaining every mile? She She was a smart woman. We had the luxury of time on our side. If we got to a destination and it was not what we thought, we'd spend the night and drive on the next day. Conversely, if we were having the time of our life, Yellowstone, Grand Tetons National Park come to mind, we'd stay an extra few days or a week. No plans, no reservations, no cell phones, just us. 4 people out to explore nature and learn about the world, learn about each other, and learn about ourselves. No television on these trips. So what was our evening ritual? Come on, this is a story about Georgie. After we had cleaned up from the evening meal and usually hung out around the campfire for a while, we'd get ready for bed and all would be in our sleeping bags in the tent, and Mom would read aloud by lantern every night. Our school years were fun too during this time. Georgie decided to go back to work taking night classes, first to obtain her master's from Cleveland State. She did this at night because my dad would be home from work and could watch us. Our parents did everything in their lives with their children in mind, or at least that's the way it felt. My mom was my Cub Scout leader one year, my Sunday school teacher one year. She was always willing to volunteer for anything her kids needed. She was also always guiding us in a gentle way and always teaching. Chapter 5, Teaching the Birds and the Bees. This is the shortest and most awkward chapter in this book. Why? Because puberty is short and awkward. Our heroes had a flaw. All do. The flaw was how to approach your preteen about the delicate subject of sex. I know this flaw is my 20-something-year-old children are still waiting for that time. At least the proper one. So how did Georgie approach this? Well, being Georgie, she gave me a book. It was Nancy Friday's Men in Love or something like that. A book that was filled with sexual fantasies of various people. I remember it vividly, and I hope my face is not turning red, as it had some truly memorable stories. What did that book do? What Georgie always did. It allowed me to realize that I was not a misfit with my thoughts. I was not alone. I fit in. Chapter 6, Small Faces in Foreign Places. Mom loved her 25-plus years of teaching in the Cleveland Heights school system. Her passion in her work was evident as I went to middle school and high school with students she had taught. I became close friends with many in my grade and acquaintances with many others close to my age. And I marveled at almost every one of them. These weren't just nice comments. These were comments that came years after becoming friends with these people. So I knew they were talking from their hearts. I got a text on my phone Monday from a fraternity brother of mine who had been a student, and he told me how he was sorry and how he was honored to have Georgie Adamson as a teacher. She always felt every child had something special in them. She was always ready with her masks of love. Her dedication and joy were also apparent as she became close personal friends with a lot of her teaching coworkers. Georgie made where she was a community. In all her times of life, this was the case. While teaching, she watched her boys grow up and ultimately out. After Jack moved out, we had another invited guest as Pilo moved in for 6 months or so. He was a political refugee from Guatemala on the overgrown railroad who was making his way to Canada. Georgie housed him while he waited for the proper paperwork to be done. Another person who kept in touch for years with Mom and Dad. More family, another cause. In 1988, Georgie and Don became empty nesters. My father already retired. Mom joined that status in '95. Idle times ahead? Not for Georgie. Travel and more volunteer opportunities awaited. Their biggest joy after being parents began in the 1990s as their grandkids emerged into their lives. 6 in all, 3 from each son, and an equal split of boys and girls. Mom's idea of heaven. My wife and I used to joke that after retirement, the 2 hardest people to get hold of were my parents. They spent time volunteering, they spent time with friends, spent time with seniors who needed friends, and mostly spent time grandparenting and traveling. Besides getting to do some overseas traveling, like to her ancestral Norway, they bought an RV and would spend winter months down south. First, some years in Tucson, Arizona, where Georgie would spend time volunteer teaching on a local Indian reservation. When age sent them closer to Florida for the winters, they volunteered at a state park that was a manatee refugee park for manatees that had been damaged. With one more charge of civic passion in her, Georgie also spent time doing a lot of work in 2007 and 2008 as a district campaign leader for Barack Obama's presidential campaign, even going door to door many times, this time with some of my children, her grandkids, along to help, showing another generation about going out and making your voice be heard if a cause moved you. Chapter 7, the final chapter, meeting the challenge after an unfinal goodbye. Georgie's final 10 years were not easy. A dual blow of a major 8-hour aortic aneurysm surgery and an early Parkinson's diagnosis close in time around 2009 did a lot to hamper her physical capabilities. This couldn't stop Mom from enjoying life and damper her almost always upbeat moods, however. She'd make games of the rehab assignments and laugh about what she couldn't do well anymore. Even after that grueling surgery and still in her recovery, she insisted that her sons and all 6 grandkids come with Mom and Dad on their 50th wedding anniversary. This is the same couple that took Jack and I on their 25th wedding anniversary trip. I hope my kids weren't listening to that part. Before this surgery, Georgie had grave concerns. She told them to us, and she said some sorts of final goodbyes just in case. She survived it, as she was a fighter. When she passed and we were going through the photos, mementos, and memories with each other, my dad found her written goodbyes from that time, her unfinal goodbye. I'd like to end by sharing Georgie's own words from 2009. To her 2 sons, quote, "Didn't we have fun camping all over and seeing so much of the beautiful USA and Canada and zipping around on the hurricane boat at Angola? I can still see my handsome boys and Don on water skis." To her grandkids, "Remember, your fine senses of humor will get you through life," all capital letters. She told my brother and I that at least 103 times. I hope you realize that was her philosophy. And I love at the end, she said, "and marriage." So your fine sense of humor will get you through life and marriage. I'm not sure what that says, Dad, about your marriage. But it lasted 59 years. So laughter is a part of that. I've learned that. And finally, to my father. My mom thanked him for taking such good care of her with some of her health issues she had already had, and commented that she regretted life did not afford her the opportunity to return the favor from my father. She mentioned the trips in Angola and all the fun they had, and she finished her letter to my dad with this, quote, "As John Muir said, I've had enough joy for 3 or 4 lifetimes. P.S. I also love Woody Allen's quote, I don't mind dying, just rather not be there when it happens." And that's my mom.
Please rise now as you're willing and able. Join us in singing a hymn called We Are. It's in the hymnal, if you want to look at the music. It's in the teal hymnal. It's number 1051, about 3/4 of the way back. But it's a tough one to follow with a lot of repeats and it moves quickly. So we've reprinted it and put it in your order of service.
Likely many of you are already familiar with your sense of humor, but for those who aren't, I wanted to share just a few of the many ways Georgie made our family gatherings incredibly memorable. First, if you were going to Grandma's for dinner, we were most often asked if we could stay a little longer and play cards. One of our favorites was Tripoli. She always felt it was more fun to play for money So she'd have Don lug along a big bag of coins, and then everyone could keep their winnings. A grandchild favorite for sure. We played charades and board games too. Always something to lighten the mood and keep the party going a little longer. Even in the last 6 months, when Parkinson's dementia really began to set in, she still wanted to play cards every week when we visited. Honestly, up until about 2 months ago, when so much of her day-to-day life was filled with confusion, she still remembered favorite card games, and we'd play Kings in the Corner or Pinochle with her, and she was still winning too. But the time when we really see Grandma's humor side come out was Christmas. We always had Georgie Adamson Christmas on Christmas Eve. Our traditional dinner was soup, followed by a course of sandwiches and lefse, which is a Norwegian flatbread that she taught Lisa and myself to make, and now the grandkids all bake together every year on December 25th. Georgie always handed out a big bag of candy to each of us along with a novelty toy. The toys were inexpensive little trinkets, sort of like a Happy Meal prize on steroids. Many of which I often wondered, what in the world does this do, and where in the heck did she get it? She'd hand out cattle balls, which is a real treat to give to 6 grandkids who are just typed up on a bag of chocolate you gave them. Or we brought some along. She'd give us these cool light-up balls that spin. We don't know what they are, but my kids have kept these for years because they spin around. Yeah, the cats love them too, exactly. She gave Lisa and myself these really cool makeup mirrors that also double as a phone charger. I mean, where did she find this? My very favorite, though, she gave the kids a few years ago, was this light-up gummy toys. These are like little light-up lightning bugs that, I mean, again, where in the world did she find these? Only my mother-in-law would be able to get these. In addition to the novelties, she always had the tradition of giving each of us a book to open before dinner. About a month or 2 before Christmas, she'd ask each of us if there was a particular book we wanted that year, and if so, she'd purchase it. If we didn't have a particular book in mind, then she'd give us a book on a subject that we might be interested in, or perhaps one that just might entertain a grandchild. Then there were the years when we didn't have a book request, and she'd purchase whatever book she thought we might enjoy. Such was the year that she got me a book on the life of an Amish woman, and got my sister-in-law Lisa 50 Shades of Grey. True story. Yeah. I have no idea what message she was sending. I think Jack got the bad end of that deal. Although it might have to do with the book Dave got. I don't know. This is all tied in now, so I'm starting to connect the dots. The bottom line is that Georgie looked for the humor in life and wanted all of us to see it too, which we definitely did. And in her memory, we want all of you to see the humor in life. And so we would ask each of you on your way out today to please take one of the little novelty items that we have in the basket by the door. So there's a basket next to where the little TV is. Full disclosure, there's no cool light-up toys and there's no gummy lightning bugs in there, okay? But they're just a bunch of silly bits of whimsy, and that's what Georgie Adamson shared with us and what we want to share with each of you. Thank you, Mom. Every time I see a whoopee cushion, a squirting toy, most definitely a whatchamacallit doohickey that lights up, I will think of you and smile. And now her granddaughter, Brianna.
Okay, surprise. At first I thought I wasn't going to read anything. Most of you who knew my grandmother know that she was an amazing storyteller. I thought that I would want to share one of her stories, but I realized none of you knew who Tommy the Seagull was or Alien Baby, so those wouldn't be very good stories to share. My grandmother loved her grandchildren as much as she loved storytelling. For me, a very anxious child, she would tell me stories to help me calm down. What I wanted to do today was to tell you guys a story to help you with the pain of losing someone as amazing as my grandma. But instead, what was even more amazing is that my cousin wrote a poem. And this poem is so my grandmother that I can't even stand it. Like my dad said, there are 6 of us. Today we're represented by 4 of us. My brother Noah is in Chicago, and my cousin Sarah is in California. Something that was very important to my grandmother is our education. Both of my brother and my cousin are in those places receiving their educations and doing some of the things that grandma loved best, like art and helping others. So they're not able to be here today. So this poem represents us, the grandchildren. It's called Memories. My first thought is silly. Now that I think about it, so is my second and third. My memory is endlessly flooding with giggles, laughs, hours of smiling, dressing up in costumes, pretending I'm a queen, gifting me stuffed animals, taller than me, playing the bongos, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, shy and quiet to the rest of the world. I blossomed at the sight of her smile, making games to see who could save the world first, reminding me that no step is too small, placing her gold necklace around my neck. This is from when I fought for peace, pointing at the sculptures on the coffee table from Africa, Arizona, China, traveling the world without leaving the cozy apartment, endlessly doting on Sheba, peaches, summer days gliding by as we float in the quiet pool. My granddaughter is like a mermaid. As I twirl in the water and absorb the sunlight and her smile, the sound of coins jingling as we play games. Dawn, get your money. She loved when Emmy and Jack called her Graham Cracker. So we'd always write that on the score sheet in order to make her smile. And looking back, it's these simple, silly memories that bless my childhood most. Her memory to me will always be the effortless happiness, hours of giggling, picture albums full of dress up until we meet again. I love you, Grandma. Thanks.
There was so much that I loved about Georgie. But I think the thing that I loved most was that up until a few months ago, whenever we had a death in the congregation, she was here for the memorial. And whenever there was a chance for the gathered to share their memories, in addition to the eulogy and the other reflections, she always spoke. And I can guarantee you that every single time it was incredibly poignant and she got an incredible laugh out of it. So this is your chance to return the favor to her, but no pressure. If you can, I'd like to ask you to come up to the pulpit and speak in the microphone and start by telling us your name, maybe even how you know Georgie. If you're super tall, you will feel like playing with the microphone, I guarantee you, but trust me, you don't have to, we can all hear you. And if you can't come up, just raise your hand and I'll be happy to bring you a microphone.
My name is Carol Clement, and I have the pleasure of knowing Georgie through the church. When I think of Georgie, when I'm with Georgie, when I see Georgie coming into the church, I'm reminded of the first two lines of a poem by Lord Byron. She walks in beauty like the night in a cloudless clime with a star-studded sky. That was Georgie for me.
My name is Ralph Stark, and I met Georgie in 1977. I was a teacher at Noble Elementary School, and I was the rookie, as she would call me. And Georgie had this way of inviting everybody in. And Jim McKee, our principal, said, surround yourself with good people, and you'll do well in this educational field. And so she was one of the first people that welcomed me in. And I surrounded myself with her and Peg, who was one of her best friends at Noble School. And I took over for Rosemary, who's here today, in 5th grade. And Georgie taught 6 at a time. She was more than welcome to share with me any expertise, but what she shared the most was her laughter and her ability to laugh at herself. If you walked into our lounge, teacher's lounge, you know, some lounges it can be very depressing places. All everyone is doing is complaining about people. Our lounge was laughter for an hour and 20 minutes because Georgie was there. She just had story upon story filled with things she had done with her students, or students had said to her, and we'd all share in our mistakes we had made teaching that day. Because you don't do everything perfectly. Georgie is more than willing to point out her flaws, and that made us all eager to do that too. So she really was a person of laughter and of inclusion too. She's always the first when a new student came in to make sure they felt welcome at that school too. And one thing I will share that most of you probably don't know, that Georgie and I share a birthday. We're both born on February 26th. And her good friend Peg, we had some superstitions at Noble. We were always looking for a snow day. And Peg, I think it was Joy Liquid dishwashing soap the day before we get a snow day. So Georgie and I both team up on February 25th. And more than a few times we had a snow day on our birthday. And we were more than happy to call each other to wish ourselves happy birthday on February 26th if we had a snow day when we were at home. But I'll miss you, Georgie. Thanks.
My name is Michelle Slane, and I first met Georgie when I came to Noble to teach about 40-some years ago, and she taught me a lot. She was one that kept the Noble staff uplifted, and she kept the teacher's lounge lively, to say the least. Her stories were a source of laughter. And indeed, she did have a way with words. She was a great friend and colleague. I taught on the same team as she. She was an outstanding teacher and a student advocate, and just an overall wonderful lady. I'll miss her. She was one that gave everything that she had to the children. She spread joy to everybody. And it was an honor to know her. And on a side note, my son had her as a student in her middle school class. And he said the other day that she was one of my favorite.
Hi, my name is Steve Beecham. And I'd like to say, I wish I knew Georgie as long as so many of you have known her. But I realized deep down, it doesn't matter if I didn't know her as well as you, because she made such an impression on me. The first time I really got to talk to Georgie and really meet her is when I came to the church. And every year the men have a dinner for the women, and it's really a lot of fun. Well, I did on this and I came, and everyone was having a joyful time, and it was time to go home. I don't remember exactly who said this, but someone said, "Does anyone live in Euclid?" And I said, "Well, I do." And they said, "Would you think you'd be able to take Georgie home? Don wouldn't have to make a trip." I said, "I'd love to take Georgie home." So we got in the car, and that was when I first started to really get to know her sense of humor, her stories. And I realized, gosh, we have more things in common. First of all, we both live in Cleveland Heights. We both we're socially active in social justice issues. Georgie was a swim instructor, and I love swimming. And so it just sort of kind of blossomed. Whenever I came into church, I can see exactly where Georgie and Don sat. I always looked at them and thought, what a beautiful couple. How lucky they were to have each other. And I always admired, because I said this to Don, they were so spiffy looking. Georgie was always so cute, I have to say. She had a big smile on her face, everything all matched. And Don, just like he is sitting there today with his tie and jacket on, was sitting next to her. And I always thought, wow, they make a great couple. As the time went on, when Georgie got sick, I had the opportunity and the privilege to visit her at hospice, at Euclid General, and at Aberdeen. And the first time I went to the hospital, I called Don and I said, "Do you think it'd be okay if I visit Georgie?" He says, "Oh, yeah, she'd probably like that." So I go up to her room, and she's not there, so she's down in physical therapy. Well, I thought, well, I'll just go down there. So I ended up spending about an hour with her, and we had a grand time. She was doing her exercises, and we were busy talking. So I love flowers, and I thought, I'm going to bring Georgie some flowers. So she loved these flowers, and I said, well, Georgie, if I get that vase back, I promise I'll bring you more. Just sort of said that, not thinking about the vase. So a couple weeks later, Georgie is home. I'm in my kitchen. I hear a little knock, knock, knock on the side door. I go to the side door, and who is there but Don? On his bicycle. Not walking, not a car, but on his bicycle. Well, we probably lived, what, about 3 miles away when you were living in Euclid? He's there carrying my vase. And it was very ominous out. It looked like it was going to rain, so we didn't talk long. I said, I better get going before I get caught in the rain. And as the time went on, I belonged to the Y, and I used to see Don all the time. Me going to the pool and him working out. So what I want to say is, I'm really miss seeing you together in church, and I'm going to miss Georgie. I don't know why I feel so strongly about a woman that I only knew 4 years, but I do. And I hadn't planned to get up here and say this, but she just made a big impression on me. And I hope that we're going to continue to see Don coming to church too. Because not only did we love Georgie, we loved Don. Thank you.
I'll always think of Georgie as a trickster, as a kind of sacred clown who could disarm a group with humor and a bit of foolishness, and then make the comment or ask the question that cut to the core of any situation. With a twinkle in her eye and not the slightest bit of guile, she can name an injustice or offer up a solution. Ages ago, long before any of us were ever thinking about her memorial service, the manner of the trickster. Georgie specifically requested drumming at her memorial service. And it makes sense when you think about it, because for years she had been a member of a drumming circle. So after the choir sings the postlude, we'll be gathering here in the sanctuary for refreshments. And as that happens, you're welcome to join a drumming circle out in the narthex. We've got plenty of drums, and together we can make a joyful sound to entertain the great cloud of witnesses we brought with us today and celebrate Georgie joining them. But first, now that we've shared so many memories of our dear, sweet Georgie, let us join together in a collective, dramatic, and maybe even poetic act of love and justice. The speaking of truth, known by many simply as a prayer. May they who knew Georgie best and loved her most be comforted by the divine compassion expressed here today. May her husband, children, grandchildren, extended family, and friends find comfort in one another. Our sharp and deep grief gives us an empathy beyond all words, an empathy that gives us strength and the assurance that we are not alone. May we find comfort in the diverse community of all people and all races and all genders and all social locations who grieve with us, who want to help and offer ongoing compassion, the compassion of every soul in every age. May we find comfort in that which never dies, but lives forever in the bosom of nature. The whisper of the wind, the refreshment of the rain, the round embrace of the sky, the warm touch of sunlight, the sparkle of light on water, the comfort of those things that seemingly never change and give us glimpses of the eternal. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Spirit of comfort and love, ancestors of all, great cloud of witnesses that accompany us through our days, grant that this may be so for those whose grief is sharp and deep. May we find a way, as Georgie would have wanted, to approach life with humor and grace, to always strive to do what is right, and to make the world more just and more compassionate in the process.